Et si je vous disais que Rabbi Joseph a découvert le moyen de percer le masque de n'importe qui en seulement 2 questions? Et si la personne assise en face de vous, en ce moment même, cachait quelque chose de si fondamental sur elle-même qu'elle-même l'ignore? Restez avec moi, car après avoir vu cette vidéo, vous ne regarderez plus jamais les gens de la même façon. Vous pensez connaître les gens, n'est-ce pas? Vous pensez pouvoir les déchiffrer, comprendre leurs motivations, prédire leur comportement. Mais Rabbi Joseph a dit quelque chose qui va briser cette illusion. Selon Rabbi Joseph, le père de la psychologie analytique, tout ce qui nous irrite chez les autres peut nous conduire à une meilleure compréhension de nous-mêmes. Mais voici ce que la plupart des gens ignorent. Jung a découvert que notre véritable nature ne se révèle pas dans nos succès, nos accomplissements, ni même nos échecs.
Elle se révèle de manière bien plus subtile, bien plus révélatrice, et je vais vous montrer exactement comment la découvrir. Rabbi Joseph a consacré plus de 50 ans à l'étude de la psyché humaine, et ses découvertes sont troublantes. Il a découvert que chaque personne porte ce qu'il appelait une persona, un masque que nous présentons au monde. Mais sous ce masque se cache ce que Jung nommait l'ombre, les parts de nous-mêmes que nous refusons de reconnaître. C'est là que cela devient intéressant, et c'est pourquoi vous devez prêter attention à tout ce que je dis. Jung a découvert que lorsque nous sommes à l'aise, lorsque nous avons le contrôle, nous pouvons maintenir notre persona à la perfection. Nous pouvons être qui nous voulons. Mais il existe 2 moments précis, 2 déclencheurs psychologiques précis, où ce masque finit inévitablement par tomber, et c'est là qu'interviennent les 2 questions de Jung. Selon Rabii Joseph, ces moments révèlent davantage sur le caractère d'une personne que des années d'observation. Pourquoi? Parce qu'ils court-circuitent le mental conscient et touchent directement ce que Jung appelait les complexes inconscients qui gouvernent notre comportement. Mais avant de vous révéler ces questions, vous devez comprendre une découverte cruciale de Jung sur la nature humaine. Il disait « Tant que vous n'aurez pas rendu l'inconscient conscient, il dirigera votre vie et vous l'appellerez destin. » C'est la clé pour comprendre pourquoi ces problèmes sont si dévastateurs. Jung a découvert que notre personnalité est composée de multiples couches. Le persona, notre masque public, le moi, notre conscience, l'inconscient personnel, nos expériences refoulées, l'ombre, nos traits rejetés, et l'inconscient collectif, les schémas humains universels. Voici maintenant ce qui est fascinant et pourquoi vous ne pouvez absolument pas quitter cette page. Selon Rabii Joseph, lorsque certains déclencheurs psychologiques sont activés, nous court-circuitons complètement le persona et le moi. Nous réagissons à partir de ce que Jung appelait notre moi authentique, la version brute et sans filtre de ce que nous sommes vraiment. Et Jung a identifié 2 déclencheurs spécifiques qui fonctionnent à chaque fois. Le premier déclencheur est lié à ce que Jung a découvert sur la projection. Il a constaté que nous projetons inconsciemment nos propres traits d'ombre sur les autres lorsque nous critiquons quelqu'un. Nous révélons souvent nos propres caractéristiques cachées. Le deuxième déclencheur implique ce que Jung appelait l'inflation de l'ego. Lorsque notre estime de soi est menacée ou poussée à l'extrême, notre véritable nature se révèle. Mais vous vous demandez sans doute quelles sont ces questions. Elles sont tendues, car la manière dont elles sont posées est plus importante que les questions elles-mêmes. Première question. Quel genre de personne ne pouvez-vous absolument pas supporter? Écoutez attentivement comment Jung l'interpréterait, car la plupart des gens se trompent complètement. Rabii Joseph a découvert que ce que nous détestons le plus chez les autres est en réalité le reflet de notre propre ombre, les aspects de nous-mêmes que nous avons rejetés et refusé de reconnaître. Il a appelé cela la projection psychologique. Et c'est l'un des moyens les plus fiables de cerner la véritable nature d'une personne. Lorsqu'une personne répond à cette question, elle ne vous parle pas vraiment des autres. Elle vous donne un aperçu de ses propres angles morts, psychologiques. Mais c'est là que cela devient vraiment intéressant. Et pourquoi devriez-vous prêter attention aux mots précis qu'elle utilise? Selon Rabii Joseph, plus une personne s'irrite en décrivant ce qu'elle déteste chez les autres, plus il est probable qu'elle possède elle-même ces mêmes traits de caractère. Jung disait « Tout ce que nous héritons des autres peut nous conduire à une meilleure compréhension de nous-mêmes. » Permettez-moi de vous donner quelques exemples de ce que Jung a découvert. Si quelqu'un dit « détester les personnes malhonnêtes », Jung suggérerait que cette personne a probablement un rapport complexe à la vérité. Elle se ment peut-être régulièrement à elle-même ou a connu des épisodes de tromperie qu'elle n'a pas reconnus si elle dit détester les personnes égoïstes. Rabbi Joseph Young a découvert que cela indique généralement une personne qui a tellement refoulé ses propres besoins et désirs qu'elle ne supporte pas de voir les autres exprimer ce qu'elle se refuse. Si quelqu'un dit détester les faibles, Jung a constaté que cela révèle presque toujours une personne terrifiée par sa propre vulnérabilité et qui a bâti toute son identité sur une apparence de force. Mais voici le point crucial découvert par Jung, et la raison pour laquelle cette question est si révélatrice. L'ombre ne contient pas seulement des traits négatifs, elle les contient tous, ceux que nous avons appris à rejeter en nous-mêmes. Parfois, on dit détester les vantards ou les personnes trop joyeuses. Jung a découvert que cela révèle une personne qui a refoulé sa propre joie ou sa propre confiance. La deuxième question est encore plus révélatrice, car elle prend les gens au dépourvu. Deuxième question. Parlez-moi d'une situation où vous étiez absolument certain d'avoir raison, mais où vous vous êtes trompé. C'est là que le génie de Rabii Joseph entre en jeu. Cette question est vraiment pertinente car elle révèle quelque chose que la plupart des gens ignorent en eux-mêmes. Jung a découvert que la façon dont une personne réagit à l'erreur révèle bien plus son véritable caractère que sa façon de réagir à la justesse. Pourquoi? Parce que l'erreur menace ce que Jung appelait l'idéal du moi, l'image que nous avons de nous-mêmes comme compétents et savants. Selon Rabii Joseph, lorsque notre idéal du moi est menacé, plusieurs mécanismes de défense inconscients se mettent en place. Le déni. On prétend ne pas avoir eu tort, mais que les circonstances ont changé. La rationalisation. On élabore des explications complexes pour justifier son erreur. La projection. On accuse les autres de nous avoir induits en erreur. Et la minimisation. On affirme que cela n'avait pas d'importance. Mais voici la découverte surprenante de Jung. Les personnes au caractère le plus fort, selon lui, n'utilisent aucun de ces mécanismes de défense. Elles pratiquent plutôt ce que Jung appelait « maintenir l'attention des contraires ». Elles peuvent reconnaître leur erreur sans que leur image d'elles-mêmes ne s'effondre. Rabii Joseph disait « Le privilège d'une vie est de devenir pleinement soi-même. Et ceux qui savent examiner honnêtement leurs erreurs sont ceux qui s'engagent activement dans la réalisation de leur véritable nature. Mais prêtez attention à ces réactions spécifiques. Rabii Joseph a découvert que l'incapacité à trouver des exemples révèle des tensions de caractère cruciales. Jung dirait que cette personne vit dans un tel déni de sa propre infaillibilité. C'est ce que Jung appelait l'inflation psychologique. L'ego devient si rigide qu'il ne tolère aucune imperfection et blâme immédiatement les facteurs externes. Discovered that this indicates someone with an external locus of control. They believe that life happens to them rather than through them. These people rarely take real responsibility if they become defensive in responding. Jung found that this reveals someone whose entire self-esteem is built on being right. Their identity is so fragile that admitting a mistake feels like psychological death. If they can laugh at their mistakes, according to Rabii Joseph, this indicates psychological maturity and what he called the integration of the ability to accept both the positive and negative aspects of oneself. But here is the most important thing Jung discovered about this matter. Rabii Joseph. Your vision becomes clear when you look into your heart. He who looks outside dreams. He who looks inside awakens. Jung discovered that these two questions work because they force people to look inward, even when they think they are talking about external things. The first question makes them reveal their shadow projection, and the second question reveals their relationship with their own fallibility. But Jung found something even deeper, and that's why you absolutely must understand this concept. According to Rabii Joseph, people fall into predictable patterns based on how they answer these questions. The inflated ego type. These people project all the negative traits onto others and cannot admit their mistakes. Jung discovered that these individuals are actually the most insecure, building elaborate defenses against their own shadow material. The self-deprecating type. These people pretend to hate traits they actually possess and necessarily admit their mistakes. Jung observed that this is also a defense mechanism. By superficially acknowledging flaws, they avoid addressing them in depth. The integrated type, those rare individuals, can recognize both their projections and their errors without their self-image collapsing. Jung called this psychological integration, the hallmark of mental health. Now, this is where Jung's intuition becomes practically invaluable. Rabii Joseph discovered that once you understand someone's pattern, you can predict their behavior with surprising accuracy. Why? Because Jung found that people are far more consistent than they appear. They simply express their basic pattern in different ways depending on the situation. But there's something even more important that Jung discovered. And if you're still watching, you need to hear this. Rabii Joseph. He spent decades studying what he called the dark side of human nature and discovered specific red flags that appear when you ask these questions. Red flag in disguise. They project all negative traits onto specific groups. Jung discovered that healthy people recognize negative traits in all types of people. When a person constantly projects onto a single group, political party, gender, race, or profession, Jung found that this indicates a dangerous psychological split. Red flag individuals. They've never been wrong about anything important. According to Rabii Joseph, this level of denial is what he called psychological inflation, a dangerous detachment from reality that often precedes major life crises. Red flag individuals. Their energy changes completely when they discuss what they hate. Jung discovered that sudden energy shifts indicate you've touched on a major shadow complex. The more dramatic the shift, the more repressed material you've uncovered. Red flag in disguise 15. He aggressively turns the questions back on you. Rabii Joseph observed that people who immediately deflect these questions are often hiding the most important shadow material. But here's what Jung discovered. That might be the most important insight of all. Rabii Joseph. He said, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is a reaction, both are transformed. If this information has created a chemical reaction in you, please share this video with someone who might need it. Your simple action could be the catalyst for their transformation." Jung discovered that these questions don't just reveal character, they actually change people. Why? Because the act of honest self-reflection is what Jung called the beginning of individuation, the process of becoming your authentic self. And that's why you need to be careful in how you use this knowledge. According to Rabii Joseph, when you see someone's shadow material, you have a choice. You can use it to manipulate them, or you can use it to understand them more deeply. Jung discovered that manipulation creates what he called a psychological poison. It corrupts both the manipulator and the manipulated. But when you use these insights for true understanding, Jung found that something remarkable happens. The product. Relationships become more authentic, more honest, more real. Now here's the part Jung discovered, and it will change how you see yourself. Jung realized that these questions work both ways. When you ask them of others, you are also forced to confront your own answers. When you judge someone else's projections, you reveal your own. When you analyze how they handle being wrong, you confront your own relationship with fallibility. For Lyon said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to a better understanding of ourselves." This isn't just a pretty phrase, it's the key to psychological growth. But Jung discovered something even deeper about human nature. According to Rabii Joseph, once you understand these psychological patterns, you can apply them to all areas of your life. In relationships, you can see beyond the persona your partner presents and understand their deeper psychological patterns. Jung discovered that this leads to a more authentic intimacy. In business, you can identify people's deep motivations and blind spots. Rabii Joseph. It has been observed that most business conflicts stem from unrecognized shadow projection. In raising children, you can help them develop self-awareness by modeling honest self-reflection. Jung discovered that children who learn to recognize their shadow early develop stronger psychological health. In leadership, you can create environments where people feel safe to be authentic. According to Rabii Joseph, authentic leadership requires acknowledging one's own shadow material first. But here's the most important thing Jung discovered. Rabii Joseph discovered something crucial about using psychological insights. The most terrifying thing is to accept yourself completely. Jung found that people who become adept at reading others often use this ability to avoid looking at themselves. They become psychological voyeurs, dissecting everyone else while remaining blind to their own patterns. According to Rabii Joseph, this is the greatest danger of psychological knowledge. It can become another defense mechanism, another way to avoid authentic self-confrontation. Jung said, "Your task is not to seek love, but simply to seek and find all the barriers you have built against it within yourself. The same is true for self-knowledge. Your task is not to analyze others, but to find the barriers you have built against knowing yourself. So, here is my challenge for you." Rabii Joseph spent decades poring over the darkest corners of the human psyche, and what he discovered there was uncomfortable. It wasn't neat. It wasn't the sanitized version of self-knowledge most of us prefer. Instead, Jung found something far deeper and more unsettling, that every person we meet is a mirror reflecting aspects of ourselves we'd rather not acknowledge. But Jung grasped something crucial about human nature that most people completely miss. Before we can truly understand others, before we can decipher their motivations, predict their behavior, or help them grow, we must first turn that penetrating gaze inward. We must be willing to confront the uncomfortable truths about ourselves that we spend most of our lives avoiding. This is why Jung would insist that before using his most revealing psychological insights on someone else, you must first answer two deceptively simple questions about yourself. The first is the mirror. What we can't stand. What kind of person do you absolutely can't stand? Think about it for a moment. Really think about it. Who gives you goosebumps? Who triggers that instant, visceral reaction of disgust or irritation? Is it the know-it-all who monopolizes every conversation? The passive-aggressive colleague who never says what they think? The perpetual victim who blames everyone else for their problems? The ruthlessly ambitious person who steps on others to get ahead? Whatever type of person you chose, Jung would tell you something that might make you uncomfortable. You've just revealed something fundamental about your own shadow self. Those aspects of your personality that you've rejected, repressed, or refused to acknowledge. Jung's concept of the shadow isn't about being bad or malevolent. It's about being whole. Every human being contains the full spectrum of human potential, the capacity for faith, kindness, and cruelty, wisdom and folly, strength and weakness, altruism and selfishness. But as we develop our conscious identity, we inevitably reject certain traits, pushing them into the unconscious realm Jung called the shadow. The people who irritate us most aren't random. They carry traits that exist within us, but that we've disavowed. The arrogant person you can't stand. Look deeper. Don't you have your own relationship with pride and unacknowledged superiority? The passive-aggressive person who drives you crazy? Ask yourself if you don't have your own ways of avoiding direct confrontation while trying to control the outcome. This isn't about blaming or judging, it's about acknowledgement. Jung discovered that our strongest reactions toward others are rarely about them, they're about us. When we judge someone harshly, we often see a disavowed part of ourselves reflected back at us, and this acknowledgement creates an unconscious panic that we experience as irritation, anger, or disgust. The shadow isn't our enemy, it's our teacher. Shadows contain not only our rejected negative traits, but also positive qualities we've disavowed because they didn't fit our self-image or weren't acceptable in our environment. The person whose confidence you envy might be showing you your own unexpressed power. The person whose emotional expressiveness irritates you might reflect your own buried capacity for feeling. The second mirror is our relationship with fallibility. Think of a time when you were absolutely certain you were right, but you were wrong. This second question is even deeper than the first. It asks us to examine not only what we dislike about others, but also how we deal with one of the most difficult aspects of being human: fallibility. How do you react when you discover you were wrong? Do you shy away and rationalize? Or do you attack the person or information that challenged your certainty? Do you retreat into shame and self-criticism, redouble your efforts, and insist that you are still right despite the evidence to the contrary? Or do you pause, reflect, and honestly consider what this moment of error might teach you? Jung understood that our relationship with being wrong reveals everything about our psychological maturity. The person who cannot tolerate being wrong is trapped in a prison of their own making, forever defending a false self that must maintain the illusion of perfection. The person who collapses in shame when they are wrong is also trapped, unable to separate their worth from their accuracy. But the person who can sit with error, the person who can examine their mistake with curiosity, rather than defensiveness, has accessed something profound. They have touched the humility that Jung considered essential for true psychological growth. They have recognized that certainty is often an illusion, that our perspectives are limited, and that being wrong isn't a catastrophe, it's information. When you can honestly examine a time when you were wrong, you begin to understand the psychological mechanisms that create certainty in the first place. See how your ego constructs narratives to protect itself, how your mind selects evidence that confirms what you want to believe, how your emotional investments in being right can blind you to obvious truths. Jung's insight wasn't just academic. He discovered that only when we have honestly confronted our own shadow material can we help others confront theirs. Only when we have faced our own relationship with error can we understand what others reveal when they answer these questions. Indeed, psychological projection works both ways. Just as we project our disavowed traits onto others, we also project our own psychological processes. If you haven't examined your own shadow, you'll see shadows everywhere except where they actually exist. If you haven't grappled with your own fallibility, you'll misjudge how others deal with being wrong. The person who has done this inner work develops what Jung called psychological acuity, the ability to see beneath surface behaviors for the underlying psychological dynamics. They can recognize when someone's anger is actually fear, when someone's arrogance is actually insecurity, when someone's rigidity is actually terror of chaos. But more importantly, they develop compassion when you've seen your own capacity for self-deception, rationalization, and defending the indefensible. You cease to be surprised or judgmental when others do the same. You recognize these behaviors not as character flaws, but as universal human strategies for dealing with psychological pain. Jung's ultimate insight wasn't about becoming an expert at reading people. It was about becoming an expert at reading yourself. Because when you truly understand your own psychological landscape, when you've mapped your own shadow and made peace with your own fallibility, something remarkable happens. Other people cease to be mysterious. You begin to see that the colleague who frustrates you is grappling with the same internal conflicts you are. They're simply expressing them differently. The family member who drives you crazy is fighting against the same fundamental fears you harbor. The stranger whose behavior seems incomprehensible uses different strategies to meet the same basic human needs as you. This recognition doesn't excuse harmful behavior or eliminate the need for boundaries, but it transforms your relationship with others from one of judgment and frustration to one of understanding and ultimately compassion. As Jung himself said, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to a better understanding of ourselves. The question isn't whether these insights will change how you see people. They will. The question is whether you're brave enough to let them change how you see yourself because, as Jung discovered over decades of working with the psyche and human beings, that's where real transformation begins, in the necessary and liberating uncomfortable work of knowing yourself completely, shadow and all. Thank you so much for staying with me on this exploration. If you found value in today's discussion, please subscribe to the channel and share this video with someone who might benefit. And if you'd like to go the extra mile by supporting this work, you can now leave a big thank you below. It's a small way to say thank you, and it really helps keep this channel going.